What settings should you use for professional looking videos? This is the camera user's guide to camera settings for video. For video, there are many settings that have a big effect on the image. Frame rate, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and white balance. In this video, we will look into what they do and how you can use them to make your videos look great. For the best professional looking video, you should set all these settings manually. Let's grab a camera and get into it. Frame rate means how many frames are captured per second. Movies are usually 24 frames per second or FPS, and TV is 50 or 60 FPS depending on the region. If you publish on the web, you can usually use any frame rate, 24, 25, 30, 50, 60. It comes down to your preference on the look of the video. 24 FPS looks cinematic, whereas 50 FPS has the look of a soap opera. If you want to take slow motion video, you can make it by shooting in higher frame rate and then slowing it down. So if you shoot in 60 FPS and show it in 24 FPS, you can slow it down to 40% of the original speed. Shutter speed controls the motion blur. For natural movement, you should choose a shutter speed that is double your frame rate. So if you are shooting at 25 frames per second, you would choose the shutter speed of 1/50th of a second. If your shutter speed is higher, movement gets jittery like this. And if it's lower, it makes the movement look very dreamy and soft. Aperture affects the depth of field. When you want both the foreground and background in focus, you choose a big f-stop number like f11. When you want only the subject in focus and background blurred, you choose a small f-stop number like f4 or lower. So small value means little in focus, large value means a lot in focus. Now the focus is in my hand and the f-stop number is really small, f1.8. You can see that my face is getting blurred, so the depth of field is shallow. When we raise the f-stop number to f5.6, more of depth becomes in focus and you see my face more clearly. You can use this as a creative tool. Sometimes you want to focus the viewer's attention on one thing, and then you will know that the aperture affects the depth of field. It's good to note there are also other things that affect depth of field, like focal length and the distance to the subject. ISO tells the amount of, let's call it, digital exposure boost. With higher ISO settings, the image gets brighter by digital amplification, but suffers from more image noise, worse color, and smaller dynamic range. So the image quality gets worse. Use the lowest ISO that gets you the correct exposure. Here you can see how the image looks in high ISO. You can see the small noise dots bouncing around. You can raise the ISO some amount without losing too much of the image quality, but I can't tell you any specific numbers as it's subjective and varies camera to camera. If you have no way to add light to your scene and you can't use a smaller f-stop number, using very high ISO is better than not getting the shot at all, but it's recommended to avoid it. White balance is important for video because, unlike in photography, you cannot usually completely change it in post-processing. You can take raw photos and decide the white balance later, but consumer cameras can't take raw video. It means that you need to decide before shooting how yellow or blue you want your video to be. This is a creative choice, so you need to look at your camera monitor and adjust it accordingly. Usually you want the whites in the image to appear as close to white as possible. If the white balance is off, all the colors are shifted towards either blue or yellow. When setting the white balance, you can choose from presets like sunny, cloudy, and tungsten. These can usually get you pretty close. You can also choose a custom white balance. With the custom white balance option, you show a white card or a white piece of paper to the camera and it can set the white balance for you. Let's go quickly through the full camera setup process. First, you choose your frame rate. Let's make it 30 fps for the general video look. Then we set our shutter speed as double the frame rate, so to 1/60th of a second. I estimate that we will get enough depth of field with f4. The image looks a bit dark, and we can also see from the meter here that it's underexposed. To get the correct exposure, I raise the ISO to 1600. Now the last thing to do is setting the white balance. I choose the custom white balance option, follow the camera's instructions to take a photo of this white paper, and we are done. I know it's a lot of settings to learn at once, but these are small things that you just have to learn and remember. Every time you start shooting, you should go through this same setup process. You might not need to change anything, but you need to know what your settings are and how they will affect the result. If this video was interesting, leave a like and subscribe to the Camera User to see more videos